Joining us on the line right now is Jonathan Deek. He is the founder, organizer of the Institute for Family Justice. And starting out the show, the interview with you today, Jonathan, I wanted to let you know that we did get a lot of feedback, a lot of people texting me after the interview last week. And I want to start off today's discussion with you asking a very simple, basic question when it comes to the history of this, how things have evolved and changed over the years. Let's focus mostly here in Michigan, because I want to talk about Michigan courts and Michigan friend of the courts and different legislation having to do with family justice here in the state. When did this get so basically off the rails? When I know back in the 50s and 60s growing up, divorce wasn't that common back then, but there were divorces. Don't get me wrong. There were plenty of divorces back then, but it seemed like custody of the children and trying to get along for the betterment of the kids, trying to make sure the kids weren't impacted by divorce back then. I don't remember friend of the court being that prevalent, that aggressive like it has become now. Having time to think about this, when do you think the shift, the paradigm changed in the court system, in the family court system? When did it take place, and why did it take place?
You know, that's an excellent question that actually I haven't researched yet. You know, I've got access to some databases from the state of Michigan where they talk about the cases and when they started, and that would be some great research to do and to dig into, is to know when the divorce rate went up and the custody litigation went up, you know, and started looking at when that happened and when that tide started turning. Because right now we're in a big deal right now. I know that I did do some research lately on how many people are getting married versus how many people are getting divorced, and there's astronomically more people getting divorced than married right now in the state of Michigan.
And that is a problem, I believe, because the nuclear family has been something that has been around since the beginning of time. And with that, those numbers occurring, especially in Michigan, and I'm assuming that this may even be a national trend as well, especially young women making the decision to stay single, to not get married. There's a couple of posts I've seen on social media where the young women are bragging about the fact that they're, you know, in their 30s and they're single, and, you know, they get to sleep in on Saturday mornings. You know, they get to go to the gym, they get to go and have their nails done, they get their hair done, they get to go out and party, do whatever they want to do on a Saturday night. But they don't have those family obligations. They don't have to take care of kids. They don't have to take them to soccer practice on Saturday mornings, you know, things like that. And I'm going, yeah, but they're missing a major component of life, in my opinion, of having kids and having a family and being involved in a healthy relationship, not only with your husband, but your children. I can't even fathom my life without being married to Vicky and my family and the kids and the grandkids and now the great-grandkids. This is a huge, I guess, paradigm shift that is, I mean, where's it going to go? What are we going to look like as far as a society, as far as a nation 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, in the future compared to years ago when we were growing up? How do you think this is going to happen, and what is it that you guys are trying to do there at the Institute for Family Justice? Well, you know, I see also a lot of men actually right now going their own way right now, because right now in marriage, you know, with the advent of no-fault divorce, and you can just get divorced whenever you decide, you know, men predominantly end up having to pay alimony, pay child support, and so they really, literally are risking everything to get married and have children. They really have to trust their spouse, that their spouse won't just decide to fall out of love one day and then, you know,
take their children away from them and a lot of their assets, and and so it's really dangerous for men too. And I respect women that want to not have children to say that, that's fine. This is a free country. You're free to live the way you want to live as long as you're not hurting anyone else. And it may be better with a woman that wants to live that lifestyle, because then instead of sitting down with a family she doesn't really want to live with the way that the man might want to, and then potentially separating the family, that only hurts the family. So I think it's better that a woman embraces who she is, and lives her life to her fullest, instead of potentially damaging somebody else's life by living a life that other people told her to live.
Right. No, I understand that. But I'm just, I'm at a stage, and Vicki and I are at a stage in our lives where, as we're getting older, and I'm seeing this a lot with some of our elderly friends, even older than us. We had beautiful neighbors right next door, Brad and Joan. We love them to death, and talked to them on a regular basis, and went over and watched Michigan State Spartan basketball games with them. They're Spartans like I am. And they were forced, due to dementia and getting older, that they had to sell their house and move downstate into a senior assisted living project to basically be closer to family, to be closer to their children who could stop by and, take them grocery shopping and do things like that. Well, if young women go down this road with no kids, no family, as they get older, who's going to be there to help them, get through their older years, I guess. And I guess it's just short-sighted is all I'm saying. And ultimately we want to have families, the nuclear families, but like you say, divorce rates being what they are, we now have to figure out how to deal with this. And this is basically what your group is all about.
Yeah, well, my group specifically about is doing family court reform to make the separation. Unfortunately, when people get divorced right now, separation is way more difficult than it should be. And because it's way more difficult, it costs a whole lot more money and puts a bigger toll on the family. And so I'm looking at it as reforming the way family court operates, divorce court operates, to make it more fair and amicable to protect the rights of children and their parents.
And so this basically, you're focusing totally on the courts system, the way they're currently operating, the things that they've changed and implemented. What's the motivation for these courts being overzealous? This is really the foundation of what you guys are all about.
Absolutely, absolutely. We have several different things that we're specifically earmarked to look into to try and address. The most important thing we're looking at is the right to counsel. Right now they say it's a civil matter, and if you can't afford an attorney, you have to do it yourself. And so you're going through probably the most traumatic thing you'll ever go through in your life, and then forced to learn one of the most complex systems that's in existence, the legal system, and how to understand the language and the laws in order to actually get the representation you want to progress your case forward. And right now you're being told basically this is a civil matter, even though the penalty is potentially the permanent loss of your children. And, if anything deserves a higher scrutiny and a higher standard of review, it would be what we do with our children.
Well, one of the things that I think is really, and you've mentioned this before when you've been on the show, you've done a lot of research this, is the fact that the friend of the court has been basically monetized and incentivized to do what they're doing. And it's really basically the root problem of the situation. What is it, your vision that you see your institute, again, this is Institute for Family Justice, website is there. You can check them out and see all the information there. But basically, what is it that you're hoping to accomplish that could possibly have impact on reforming the friend of the court and the family justice system?
Yeah, I want to have a team of appellate lawyers that provide pro bono appellate representation and take specific cases to the Supreme Court. I want to litigate to the Supreme Court that we should have the right to counsel. So no parent should be deprived of the right of their children without the ability to provide to counsel. I also want to change the standard of review to beyond a reasonable doubt, because right now we have a less perfect standard, and the less perfect parent becomes a visitor in their child's life. And if we keep continuing with this less perfect parent and remove all the less perfect parents parents from the children's lives, eventually you're going to be the parent that doesn't get to have your children, because none of us are perfect. Everybody's inherently flawed, and children deserve imperfect parents because it's all we have. And so I want to change the standard of review to beyond a reasonable doubt, which basically means if you're going to deprive a child access to that parent, you need to have a criminal conviction to show that they're actually not a good person, because everybody makes mistakes.
Well, and on that vein, like you say, we're all imperfect, and we do the best we can. I know in going through counseling early on in our marriage, dealing with our kids and dealing with different family issues, we talked about our parents. Everybody talks about our parents. And you say, well, my dad abused me, or my mother did this, or my dad did that, or whatever. And ultimately, it comes down to the fact we were told that, hey, your parents did the best job they could based on what they saw growing up and how they were trained basically to be a parent. And although they may not have done the best job or weren't perfect, you got to resolve the fact that they did the best job they could. And so as a result, this is something that children have to learn, children have to understand. And then, like you say, being exposed to both mom and dad, even though they're divorced, this is very critical to a child's upbringing.
Absolutely. A child is half of both of their parents. And so if they're going to understand their personality and their traits, they need to know both of their parents so they can understand themselves, so they can grow, because every generation has gotten better at raising children, right? The things were a lot more difficult 300 years ago when we didn't have indoor plumbing or hot water, and we didn't have this great medical system that could keep kids alive. You had to do a lot more to keep your children safe back then, because we live in a lot easier society to live in. And so we're constantly getting better at raising children and making them smarter and more capable, right? And so it's very important for us to continue that trend by allowing children access to both the masculine and the feminine side of their parents.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. Well, I'm going to give out the website. It's very simple, folks. I for Institute, the number 4, FJ, FamilyJustice.com is the website. You can make donations online. You can mail them a check. They have a P.O. Box 555 in Wolverine, Michigan, 49799. But you can also reach out to these folks. You can schedule an appointment to have conversations with Jonathan and others within the Institute for Family Justice. If you guys know some young people or friends, family that may need this information, just text me. Let's do Family Justice, FJ. Let's make it FJ for Family Justice. I'll send you the link, and I'll also send you Jonathan's direct contact phone number for this organization, which is 231-330-6825. Again, 231-330-6825. If they don't answer, just leave a voicemail and they'll get back to you. Final thoughts, Jonathan, message you'd like to say to the folks before I let you go today?
We really need to support the rights of our children in divorce, because really our children should not have to lose.
Absolutely agree with that statement. Got a text message. I wish Jonathan and his group was around about 20 years ago when I was having difficulties with Friend of the Court. But thank God those days are gone. And actually, our children are actually closer to us today than they were back then. So greatly appreciate everything you're doing, your group and everything. So again, just text me FJ. We'll get you the information. Jonathan's phone number, the website again, the number 4, FJ.com. So Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Randy. Have a great one. Bye.